Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on my coach, as well as the coach of many of the other people in New England powerlifting, Mike Skiba. Why don't you introduce yourself?
What's going on, everybody? Mike Skiba, owner of Hellbent Barbell, owner of Covenant Conjugate, multi-ply powerlifter, raw powerlifter, single-ply powerlifter, done a little bit of everything, so.
Yeah, so I usually like to get a little background about what kind of got them into powerlifting, but I know for you, powerlifting kind of been a part of your entire life, so maybe tell us a little bit about that, kind of growing up with your dad and kind of how powerlifting had an impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just touch on a little something here. We just had, especially in Connecticut, the owner of the Connecticut Powerlifting Hall of Fame, which dabbles into Massachusetts a little bit, suddenly passed away on Friday morning. So rest in peace, J-Pick. I know he's, everybody knows him kind of in the New England area and stuff like that. So I just wanted to put that out there. He was extremely important in the community down here. So before I tear up, R.I.P. Jay, we miss you and keep his legacy going. But I got into powerlifting at a young age. My father powerlifted, since he was in high school in the, would that be 70s and everything? So I was around it at a young age, going to meets. He was always in the gym. His friends, were always over, always talking about it. And it's funny because when I was like a little kid, these guys would be over and like I thought they were gigantic. You know what I mean? I'd be like, oh, these dudes got to be in like, the WWF and shit like that. So I was always drawn to it at, a very young age, but being around it at that time and not really knowing like what's going on, I really wasn't like interested into it or drawn into it. I would see it and, see some of my dad's old photos. I was just like, oh, it's just something quirky and stupid. But after I really didn't get into lifting until after high school. I played football, baseball, basketball all throughout high school, but was never into lifting weights, hated it, thought it was stupid. We had to do, you played football, summer, strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
I always skipped out on it. I was like, oh, this is fucking bullshit. My old varsity coach, Coach Forget, who still coaches now, he follows my stuff now. He's like, where the fuck was all this when you were a coach? This wasn't for me. And then after I graduated high school in 2006. So after I graduated high school, my friends went to college. They played sports and everything. I didn't go to college, so I really didn't have that like competitive edge really anymore. So I was going to commercial gym with my father, just kind of doing the regular bro workouts, bodybuilding shit. And my father signed me up for a powerlifting meet. And I think probably around like 07, 08. These meets aren't even on open powerlifting and stuff. It was just like local push-pulls, bench only meets. I don't think I squatted at a meet until maybe 2009, 2010. So it was all just like bullshit push-pull meets. And, I went to my first one and I was 2008. I would have been like 20, maybe 19, 20 years old. And I went into it and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to, who's ever there, but like I bench 315, I'm gonna fuck these dudes up. You go there, not realizing at the time I was like in the 220 class and there's guys that are benching like 500 pounds at like local meets. And I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what really, sparked the interest for me. It wasn't even, like I said, I'd been around it my whole life, didn't really care for it much until I got on the platform, and then that competitive edge kind of came around. And then going from the commercial gym, uh, I told my dad, I was like, hey, this is something I want to get into. And if I'm going to do it, I want to do it, correctly. So then we started going to a little local powerlifting gym, Hardcore Fitness, owned by Lou Santello. Went there for a while, stopped in at Southside before, it closed down. The Yard Fitness or Yard Strength and Conditioning for a while. So, for about 8, 9, 10 years, we were just bouncing around from, little gym would open up, close down after 2 years, find another gym. And then finally, towards the end of it, we were driving all the way up to Powerhouse in New Haven every day, and then got tired of it. We're like, fuck this. And, me, my buddy Rob Tonini, a bunch of other guys, put our minds together and opened up, Hellbent, and it is what it is today. So,
Yeah.
That's my backstory. I've, like I said, always been into it, or always been around it at a very young age. Didn't really get into it until I would say like 2008, 2009 is when I like really got going. And then at that time, people were like, it was primarily gear dominant.
Yeah.
So I was, raw training with equipped lifters. Oh, what the fuck you doing this, that and the other thing. And then, I did a couple, I don't know, maybe I bounced around, from like raw to single ply. And then I want to say maybe in 2011, 2012, maybe that's when I kind of, fully committed to multiply. And then at that time, everybody was out of multiply and, going raw. So.
Yeah. So as far as like Hellbent goes, obviously anyone in the multiply community kind of knows about the gym, knows who you are now. You've kind of built a legacy. As far as the development of it, like the early stages of it, what were some of the things that you established that kind of help you get the ground running for it?
So obviously I'm not like a businessman, anything, I opened it up with Rob Tonini, who is a former owner of Southside Gym. So he kind of knew, like, at that point, all I knew was like, oh, we had to get like a monolift, and we got to get, a power rack, power bench, or competition bench. I didn't really know like what else, the other stuff to get. So if it wasn't for, Tonini and stuff, Hellbent wouldn't be around. He was kind of the financial backing at first when we first opened, but I knew I had a vision for it because I had seen other strictly powerlifting gyms, but I didn't want to be like the typical, like every multiply gym or every powerlifting gym wanted to emulate Westside.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be Westside. Westside was, to me, it was like the New England Patriots. Like they had their thing. I wanted to try and make something to try and compete. Not that anybody really ever could, compete with that legacy of Westside, but I figure if, you try and build something to at least be competitive, with that gym, you could kind of put, leave your mark or put your stamp on things your way. So, I know I wanted it to just be, you've been to the gym a bunch of times, just a shitty gym. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like the cleanliness and like, the clean cut gyms that you walk into. Like when you walk into it, I want you to feel like you're at like, damn, all right, like it's time to go, So.
Yeah. And I think one of the best things about every time we travel down there is like the energy. And I think that's something we could talk about with the crew mentality and things like that. Like obviously it's something that Rupo up at Evolve's been able to help emulate, and we kind of have that kind of same mindset now. And it obviously transfers into multiply. Like when we first started there, John said this the other day, he was the only multiply lifter in that gym. Yeah. And now we're more multiply than we are raw.
Yeah. And I remember when John and Steph were opening the gym, I had long conversations with John, and I told him, I was like, dude, don't try and be you. You know what I mean? Like John's an awesome dude. I was like, when you go and lift, like you make your times, you have people come lift around you, and then that energy just builds and grows. Now there's, I mean, outside, I would say probably John's gym is even has more people training on it on a Sunday than, we do at Hellbent. So it's, you need that leader of the pack, to kind of control all the craziness and set the standard for everybody. And like I said, you don't have to be the strongest guy in the gym to do that. But I think now that people see that, especially in multiply, like if you could just get one person to kind of set the groundwork and be like, hey, we're going to be here, whatever it is, like Wednesdays, Fridays, Sunday mornings at these times. And then it just, just like anything, it kind of spreads like wildfire.
Yeah. And the biggest thing that I get out of being in a crew is, I forget, it was like Connor or something saying about like, if you're around a bunch of dogs, you're going to get that much stronger than if you were training by yourself. And I think the Hellbent and Evolve and all our other gyms in New England are like prime examples of, if you are in that competitive atmosphere with crazy energy like that, like you're forced to get stronger.
Yeah, dude, and like when I was first in gear, obviously at the time, like the 1,000-pound squat was like Mount Everest, you know what I mean? And even at that time in Connecticut, I think there'd only been like one guy to squat 1,000 in Connecticut. And at the time, I didn't think I could get there. Like, from like the old South Side guys, like the guys that I were training with, like the 7s and 800s at that time were like a big squat. Like when I was training with Tanini, he squatted 777, which was a good squat back then. So that was like what I thought my ceiling was. I was like, I want to hit, squat 780. That way, I could be the strongest one in my crew. And I didn't think I was going to squat 1,000. And then, I hit 800 at a meet that Delafave was at. And I had no idea who he was. We started shooting the shit. And he's like, oh, I'm only like an hour away. We should start training together. And then, he came in like the first time we squatted and he's like, bro, you got to squat 1,000. I was like, what are you, fucking crazy? He's like, why wouldn't you? I was like, it's 200 pounds away. It's fucking insane. He's like, you'll squat 1,000, no fucking problem. Let's just keep training. Then, 850 came, 900 came, 930 came. I probably took, and it's kind of defeating at that time because right when you think you're like about to squat 1,000, you're only squatting like 920,
931.
Yeah, I missed it like 4 times in a meet before I finally got it. But then like you don't realize where your ceiling is until you train with people that have extra floors on their house.
Yeah, so. Yeah, and as far as like the totem pole of the sport too, like you were saying, like 1,000-pound squat is coming a lot more common, and it's a lot more common.
Yeah,
with our crew, like everyone in the Covenant. There's so many people that have squatted 1,000 out of your gym or someone that you've coached now. And it's just mind boggling to see the difference, even just in the past few years I've been in the sport, how many more people are doing it.
And I think the biggest thing is like, if you have somebody that believes in you, that you can do it, you can get it done. Like I never thought I would be able to squat 1,000. And even the guys that I were training with, like they've never seen anybody in their crew squat 1,000. So just like, it wasn't going to happen until I started training with somebody. And then I was like, if I can do it, I know these motherfuckers can do it. You know what I mean? Like you're a 700-pound raw squatter. Like, why the fuck wouldn't I've never squatted 700 pounds raw in my life. Like why you're way stronger raw than I am. I'm probably just more I've been in the gear longer. I'm way more technical in the gear, than you right now, or Connor was, or even me and Rupo were squatting. Like, I think I squatted 1,000 before Rupo. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing, man?
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, dude, the dude is so ungodly strong, but same thing, like, just getting in the gear more sometimes is a trick. And like I said, I think you just have to have somebody that believes in you and knows you can do it and is not afraid to program you heavy weights or load up a bar for you. Like when you first came down to the gym that, getting in multiply, I was like, yo, you're going to go reverse band. And you took 1,000 that day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, yo, we're going to put 1,000. Like, damn, like, my best reverse band was like 850. And I was like, well, there's no fucking pussy shit here today. Like, let's fucking go. You can squat it 100% and hit it. You know what I mean? So, like I said, when you're around like-minded people that care about your lifting just as much as they do theirs, I think, people can do way bigger things. Connor's proving that up in New Hampshire now. Evolve is killing it out there. It's just, it's like I said, it's like, you plant a little bit of bamboo and then it takes over. And I think, that's what's going on in, the East Coast in New England right now. Ben is putting up huge numbers out in, Michigan over there. So,
yeah, and I think this is kind of a different type of episode where we can kind of maybe dive into, like, I guess my training, for example, as like you as my coach, where we can kind of break down each of the lifts and kind of go through it. Like, obviously, this meet that I just did this past weekend went very well, but it went well in a different way than expected, because obviously some of the goals I had were maybe a little ambitious, but we all believed that it was certainly possible. So
yeah, I don't think goals should be ambitious. If they're not ambitious, then there's no point of training as hard as you can. Like, I don't think 1,000-pound squat for somebody's first meet that squats 700 pounds raw is ambitious at all. You know what I mean? And we didn't even have that much. I mean, what do we have? Maybe 10 weeks we started training together. Like, I had you doing like kind of like a raw phase for like 4 weeks. And you're like, hey man, what do you think about this meet? And I'm like, all right, I guess we could just kind of just jump right into, like, I don't even think we didn't even run like a full like circuit max, how I like to, like usually my meet preps are like 14 weeks out. It's kind of like when you start it. And I think we started at like 8 weeks out and just kind of, into the fire, and you got a 270-pound meet PR.
Yeah. Cause in September, I was only in the gear for like 8 weeks at the time too. And I was working with Kirby, and it was just crazy coming back from raw into the gear again. It just felt like a whole different animal. Like, it felt not like a new challenge, but it felt like I actually had the capability to put up a decent total this time.
Yeah. And speaking of Kirby, the powerlifting world or multiply lifting world needs Kirby back in powerlifting.
I agree.
100%. He needs to fucking get back to it, do a meet, shake the dust off the gear and get going again. So, yeah. Kirby, if you're listening to this, let's fucking go. Saddle up.
Yeah. And then, so as far as like kind of like the training itself, obviously, it's a very similar to conjugate, but I think one of the biggest things that I enjoy from it that's sort of different than traditional conjugate is the volume and the heavy volume on the upper volume days, and the squatting before deadlifting. So I kind of want to know where that idea came from, and why you think it's working better.
So a lot of that, and I've told this before, a lot of that like ideology kind of came from Delafive. Obviously we program a lot of the same stuff, but you're never 100% fresh for your deadlifts. So why kind of give yourself like a false sense of where you're at? Like, if you come in and pull fresh, like, probably if you didn't have to squat, you probably could have, maybe deadlifted 775, 780 if you just did a push pull. But as a full power lifter, that never happens.
Yeah.
So, I don't think, like I said, obviously I'm not big on the whole traditional speed work aspect of it. It's more of, when we're doing like the squats before the deadlifts, it's more just kind of like greasing the groove on the squat, trying to build up a little bit more raw strength and then getting into the heavy pulling. And then how we wave it gives you a sense of like, what do I always say that for? Because I run everything in 3-week waves and then a deload. That first week, I always say, don't fucking overshoot this. Like, hit a 3-rep, max. Don't fucking miss, because it's important. So, then the following week, then what do I always say? Beat week 1's numbers. And then you kind of slowly build up and then taper back down and then slowly build. And I think a lot of people get so carried away with, trying to pull heavy, and then they just end up killing themselves. 1-rep PRs are PRs, 2-rep PRs are PRs, 3-rep PRs are PRs, 5-rep PRs are PRs, but you still need to be moving heavy weight, especially, when you're in the gear too. And I think, like I said, you get more comfortable you were in this deadlift suit probably way more this meet prep than you ever were either. Once, like I said, after 8 weeks of your pulling, then your pull started fucking flying. You know what I mean? You were ripping weights off of, blocks like it was like an empty bar. And that was with weights that you were pulling, that you were like opening up with in full gear off the floor. So
Yeah, and that deadlift came out of nowhere, and I watched that video 100 times because it's still a shock to me because I thought top end of that day was 730, and then when I pulled that 705, I was like, all right, give it to me. It's
yeah.
going.
And so, like I said, a lot of that ideology came from, Chris. I was always, before I trained with him, strictly West Side doing the speed work, which really didn't translate over to shit. I still don't really see it. Most people, it doesn't translate over to anything. So for like the squat aspect was Delafav. And then previous to him, I was working a lot with Jonathan Bird, who was, lifted for a long time with Brian Carroll and those 1020 guys down in Jacksonville, Florida. So a lot of like the bench stuff, how, hit like a raw 2-board PR first and then throw the shirt on, and then stuff like that came from Bird. And then all like the floating stuff with no boards came from, Bill Crawford's training. So like I said, the boards have their place. Floating has their place. And like I said, if you could kind of find the happy medium to everything, that's kind of what I found works best. You don't necessarily need to, if you hit a one rep max to a one board and it's 525, you're taking maybe 4 jumps to get there in the shirt.
Yeah.
Instead of, there's way more poundage moved if you're doing, throw the shirt on at 400 pounds, float triples, in 25-pound increments up until you hit 500 pounds. You're moving way more fucking, way more weight than you would just hitting a one board, 1 rep max, and plus getting way more volume. And that's where you're building the muscle. And then that's where you're getting, finding that a better groove for the shirt.
Yeah, and for me, that's one of the things that, I mean, my bench still has a long way to go, but one of the things that's improved from it was just throwing the shirt on earlier and like feeling it out and starting to rip it down and being like, all right, how close can we get with this super lightweight?
Yeah. But that was, 2022, I worked a lot with Vinny DeCenzo on my bench. And he said, you can only press what you can touch at the meet. That's it. So like, if you can't touch anything, you're fucked.
Yeah.
So I was actually in a bigger shirt than probably what I could bench in. And I was touching 4 plates in my shirt, the same shirt I benched 700 in. And going into a meet where if you hit a big squat, you're like, yo, it doesn't fucking matter what you put on the bar because I'm going to be able to touch it and smoke it anyway. So you could always open up way lighter than what you want to and take a bigger jump on the second anyway. So it's the same thing with the squat suit. The more you're in it, the more you get comfortable in it. Everybody's in the bench shirts a lot. Nobody wants to get in, a full gear squat, once a month or whatever. So
yeah. And as far as squats, kind of backtracking a little bit, I forget the exact number. I think it's close to like 15,000 pound squatters at Hellbent or in the Covenant. What do you think is one of the biggest contributors to that besides just the environment and like the culture that we have?
I mean, I just think it's, Cam did it. That means like I have to do it. Like I can't have Cam talking shit to me because he just squatted 1,000. I squat, 900. That's what I said. I think you see, people's ceilings get, brought down to eye level because they see other people doing it. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think I have like a, miracle, potion for programming. I think anybody could get strong on any kind of programming. I just think it's stupid to not. There's been so many different ways of training, ideology, and so much information put out there between what works for people, what hasn't worked for people. To kind of not put it in like a crock pot and stew everything would be stupid. And that's why I said, like, back in the day, those mental militia guys were, everybody went and saw Bill Crawford for the bench press. So like, why the fuck not take like Bill Crawford's ideology and put it into bench press? Like those guys don't do speed work. They're, they don't use boards at all. They don't do speed work. It's, a heavy volume bench day for, the secondary day. They're big with like pin presses, shoulders, And then, like I said, nobody really, the speed work aspect, I think Dave Hoff even talked about it on the Table Talk podcast. I don't think he does speed work at all. You know what I mean? Not that, I don't think that would make or break him as a lifter, but
Yeah.
So like I said, I just think, a lot of it is, getting a cornucopia of stuff, combining it together, and what I program for you may work for you, but may not work for somebody else. And I think that's on me as a coach to try and be like, okay, well, like he's struggling trying to figure this out. We need to kind of change things up. And that's why I said, like, the Circuit Max is the blueprint to kind of go by, but it needs to be open to interpretation and be able to change things on the fly. Like a lot of guys, some of the guys at Hellbent, like I don't even have them really running that Circuit Max anymore, like Rob Weber, because even Jeremy, he gets too beat up running that 3-week wave of Circuit Max. I cut it out for Rupo the last meet, same thing. He felt, way fresher, cutting out 1 week of the Circuit Max. So like I said, nothing's ever set in stone. And I think that's kind of where some coaches fumble is like, oh, you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. I'm like, if you can get through, a peaking phase and your body's like, damn, I feel good when people get to like the end of a prep and they're like, man, I'm fucking beat up. And people are like, oh, that's how you're supposed to, your body's not supposed to feel like shit lifting weights. It's just, I think a lot of people underestimate deloads and how often they should take them. So,
yeah. And I think for me, in my case, I think we got it right on the first try because I was feeling like sort of beat up at the end of prep, but like today it's 2-3 days past the meet and I'm already feeling ready to go again. So it'd be interesting to see like going into next prep, if we kind of do the same thing, see what happens again. If it keeps working, don't change if it ain't broke.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, you came out of that raw meet. So you had a good, raw base. You had a ton of raw muscle already on you. So you were in shape before getting into multiply.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people lose it when they get into multiply. They get fucking lazy because they get so reliant on the gear. And they're like, oh, I'm a multiply lifter. We got to, be in our shirts. Like, no. You need to get strong raw and you need to become technical in the gear. You don't just keep loading up weight in the gear. Taking lightweight in gear for reps is way more beneficial sometimes too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes from kind of impatience. And I know that's something that I have because I'm like, all right, I got to get this bench fixed. Like, but I'm still young in this. Like I've done 2 meets. Like I could be doing this for another 20 years. So There's no reason to fucking rush it.
You just hit 2,200. If you add 50 pounds on your total for the next, 10 years, I mean, that's, top 10 all time stuff right there, which, it's a long game for people. I've seen so many people come in, they make a big splash, and then they're out and that's it. And they've had, so much more potential than what they showed in 2 or 3 years. And powerlifting is something that you can do until you're, 67 years old if you want to, but you got to be able to make it there first.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the whole flash in the pan seems to be a more common trend in raw lifting. Would you agree?
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with, social media. Everybody sees, obviously like the Larry Wheels, the, Lily Bridges and stuff like that. Like they had good runs for 5 or 6 years and, kind of flamed out after that. Obviously those dudes are some of the best ever, but, those aren't like the average Joes, like myself just kicking around. I'm never going to be that dude. Most people won't. They're like the top, 1%. And I think a lot of people kind of go into it so hard where like, oh, I'm powerlifting now. They get so caught up in it and that it consumes their entire life. And they can't separate powerlifting from, their everyday life. And that's what I try and stress to you guys all the time is like, powerlifting should be like 3rd or 4th on the list with, of like importance, in your life. Obviously first is family, first and foremost. So like back in the day when, oh, fuck that. Like you can't do it. Like, yo, if you have kids and your kids got shit to do and you got to go to games, go to those fucking games. Cause they only happen once or twice, man. That's it. Once, you know, those kids grow up, they're gone. That's it. You don't get that fucking time back. So family, you know, obviously your professional life, you know, whether you're an engineer, a mechanic, whatever, like you should be just as driven to be successful in that as you do lifting weights. Everything outside the gym is good, makes everything inside the gym that much better.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned inside the gym as well. That kind of it goes back and forth. There's tons of things you can learn from powerlifting that apply to your professional life and vice versa. And I think something that I like to stress too is like having another hobby. Like, what if tomorrow is your last powerlifting meet? What if tomorrow's your last training session? What are you gonna do? You're gonna sit on the couch, get fat, and die of a heart attack, or are you gonna go pick up a sport or a hobby that you've had for 20 years?
Exactly. Like, you know, it kind of like I always growing up, like I enjoyed playing golf. I haven't played golf in, you know, probably 5 years now, just
Well, let's
because
go.
because I'm always so consumed with like, you know, lifting weights or on like a Sunday. Oh, I got to be in the gym instead of being like, oh, you know, let's go out and, you know, shoot 9 or something like that. So I just felt like, and I've gotten, it's happened to me too in my younger years where you just get so consumed. It's like, it's all you think about. It's all you do. And then like, you know, I look back, I'm like, fuck, where'd the 10 years go? You know? Which I wouldn't change anything, but like I said, I think people get so hyper focused on that total that's they don't give a fuck about anything else. So
Yeah, and I think for you, I know you kind of didn't necessarily experience burnout, but you kind of got caught up in everyone else in the crew that your own training kind of took a backseat, and you're kind of getting your way back into it. So what kind of led you to that point, and then what kind of got that spark back for you?
um it's weird. You know, it comes in waves. When my father passed away, I was like, I'm gonna put like all my eggs in one basket. I want to hit, you know, one good fucking total. I was at like 2310 or something like that. I was like, I got to go 2400. That's it, hanging it up. You know, I hate the term retire from powerlifting. I won't use it. I'll just say, you know, you never retire because you're still powerlifting in the gym. But, you know, that took a lot out of me trying to do that. And that's why I tell everybody too, like the amount of like harm drugs do on your body, like my labs after that meet, terrible, like horrible. And at, you know, the time 35, 36 years old, you're like, damn, like, all right. Like when you go to a urologist and they're like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? Like, is the damage that you put on yourself worth it for, you know, something that just went on open powerlifting? For me at that time, yeah, I didn't give a fuck about anything else. I did it. I wouldn't change that. But, and then after that meet, I was, you know, like I said, I was coaching a couple people in the gym, and that's kind of when I was like, you know, helping people, and they were putting up big numbers and, you know, squatting 1,000. And I got a ton of enjoyment out of that just as much as I did, you know, lifting on the platform. You know, for people to be like, yo, thank you so much for helping me get to this point. Like, you know, me helping you, like I'm a part of the total that you just produced.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really fucking cool to me. And then, like I said, but whenever, you know, I do decide to hang it up, you know, that's the legacy I'm going to leave. That's a shit that people are going to, nobody's going to remember how many 1,000-pound squats I do. Nobody's going to remember my total that I put up, because it's never going to be a, you know, top 5 total, but they will remember the, like, damn, that dude like coached a lot of big motherfucking totals, or like that dude's gym was fucking badass. Like that was like the premier multiply gym like of that era. So that's where I'm at right now. You know, I would love to, I definitely think I could squat, you know, 1,000 in a meet. If I, you know, I did the showdown meet last year. And I was like 70% into it. You know what I mean? So like I wasn't going into that. I know I was going to have a shitty meet. You know, I was squatting with, you know, Pfefferly. We were training for it. I knew he had, you know, knocking on the door at 1,200. So like I missed my second squat. I think the showdown on depth. think it was like 925, and I missed it on depth. And at that point, I was like, like I ain't squatting 1,000, but I was like, put it on the fucking bar because I'm gonna take it. And I was like, I'm gonna try and cut it high. Maybe if I get some lights, I'll get it. At that point, I was like, yo, I don't give a fuck. Andrew's gonna squat 1,200. So, like being a part of his 1,200-pound squat was worth competing at that meet to be a part of it, you know, with him. So, like I said, I think, you know, leaving a legacy, you know, on that side of things is way more meaningful for me than, you know, the total. Like I said, you know, you're still young, you're still building, you know, you're doing the whole like podcast thing. Like I said, you know, I think, you know, Merck was the one that said it. You can't outlive being an asshole.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously I'm very set in my ways, very opinionated. People obviously have their opinions of me, and don't like me, and that's fine. You know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but, you know, nobody could ever say that I didn't give a fuck or put, you know, back into the sport. And like I said, that's what's most important to me. Not done competing, but I don't have anything set, you know, in stone yet. You know, I'd like to do a meet with like you guys. You know, I haven't competed with, you know, like Bobby ever. You know, I've never competed with Germ, so I think it would be fun to, you know, lace them up and, you know, go to a meet with those guys. But we'll see. Because then, like I said, then during meet day, like, you know, I'm talking to him the whole time. I'm like, oh fuck, you know, I got to lift here.
You're like, oh yeah, I'm in this meet too. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but like I said, you know, everybody builds their own legacy. You know, I think coaching, mentoring, and stuff like that was my calling. Like I said, I'm never going to be, you know, that guy that walks in and like, oh man, Skiba's here. You know, I guess we might as well take our second and third place trophies. It's just, it's not me. But yeah, other than that, like I said, it's putting, you know, other people's, I'm not a selfish person. So like I said, I like to take care of other people. And that's kind of where I get the enjoyment in the sport.
Yeah.
Right now.
And I think kind of with part of your legacy, obviously, like you said, you're very opinionated, and it's kind of gotten into some scuttles over the years and stuff. So I would say Hellbent is obviously known for its feats and what you've done for it. And I think a good word to describe it would be like harsh and hardcore. So I think maybe some people aren't a big fan of that. So for maybe some people that maybe have heard some negative things about your gym or about you and stuff, like what would you have to say to them in terms of that?
I mean, fuck you. I don't care. Like the proof is in the pudding for me.
Yeah.
You know, I've extended, you know, invites to meets and shit like that. You know, you know, like I said, when I went back to the Powerlifting Hall of Fame, like people that I'm not a fan of, you know, I put their name in the hat to have them inducted in because they're good lifters. They've done a lot for the sport. You know, just because you're a dickhead doesn't take away your accomplishments from, you know, what you've done. So, you know, people don't like me. I don't give a fuck. Fuck them. You know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not going to go back and, you know, try and rekindle shit that, you know, isn't going to benefit me one way or the other. So, yeah, and I don't give a fuck. You know, like the guys I coach are way stronger than 90% of the lifters out there right now. And even the girls at our gym are stronger than fucking most of the other guys, you know, crews that are fucking lifting. You know, Jordan just, which he hit
855.
Yeah, like insane. Smoked it, you know, fucking she's benching 500, pulling 500. Denise is squatting over 600. Michelle's squatting over 600. Jenna's squatted, you know, over 600. So it's like, you know, even, you know, the girls at the gym, which I treat them the same as the guys, you know, little sister, big brother type feel. But like I said, if once you come in that environment, and I'm sure, I mean, I don't know what your like views were before you came to the gym or me or anything like that. You could have been like, oh, like, man, kind of a fucking rough dude, you know, rough hair. But then once people get into the gym, they're like, oh, damn, like everybody actually really fucking cares here. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I think anyone, just like everyone wants to get a trip to West Side in, I think Hellbent is a gym that everyone needs to stop by at some point in their career. And I can't remember exactly when the first time we met was, but I definitely didn't have any bad impressions of you before that.
Yeah. Like when I'm at like meets or hosting meets, like I'm running around like an asshole the whole time, like trying to do a million things. So even like when we have meets and people are coming to visit, like people say hi and like usually short with people just because I have to run around and, I can't chat for, 5-10 minutes when you're trying to coach people, run a meet, or even when I'm at meets coaching. So, um, you know, I take it serious as should anybody else when they want things to be successful. Like my guys that I coach, you, anybody else, what you do on the platform and what you do off the platform are direct, correlation to me. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is kind of instilled in our group is like, yeah, some of these guys maybe like Germ's a terrifying dude to see in person and not know him, but like you go to the meet and everyone that competes under you is a class act. They handle themselves with dignity and they go on the platform, they perform, but they don't do stupid shit and they don't have an arrogance to them that you see in some other groups in powerlifting. So
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, like I mean, even all the New England meets, like you see, if shit, I don't know when uh Mass Iron when you guys had the meet, over there that Andrew competed at, like I was in the back warm up room, like loading and spotting for people in the warm up room. I didn't even know who they are. And like most people you'll see like back then, like I'm not lifting, my guy's not, lifting over there. I'm not helping spot or load. And I think that's a big problem with people is just because you don't have somebody over there doesn't mean other people need help, and it's gratifying just having somebody like that I don't even know come up to me and be like, hey man, thanks for all the help in the warm-up room. It's like, yeah, man, that's how it fucking should be. Especially in multiply. When I first started, I didn't buy gear. Like people just gave me gear. They're like, yo, try this, keep it. Like, and that, that's how it should be, with gear. That's how it should be in the gym. Everybody should be handing off. Everybody should be rapid knees. Everybody should be spotting. Even when we have kids come into the gym and they have, headphones on, like warming up, I'm like, yo, take those fucking things off and be involved in what everybody has going on.
Yeah, and I think that the same thing up at Evolve, like when after we go to a gym as a crew, or even with Mass Iron, the same thing. We always get good feedback of like, oh, they were super helpful. They were helping other people that weren't even in their crew. They're supportive. They're on the platform spotting, and you guys do the same shit. And that's shit that gets noticed more than what they're putting up on the platform.
Yeah. Now I guess to backtrack a little bit, what were some likes, and I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
What were some likes that you did like about the programming and that we did together, and dislikes that I programmed that you thought, like, I know we've talked and you've been like, hey man, like this doesn't work, but like, is there anything that you think would have benefited you more as opposed to how we did it?
I mean, honestly, I don't think I would have changed anything. I know we had the one talk about maybe getting in the shirt more, but I think that's something of kind of what we were saying before about being impatient and just trying to jump the gun when we have so much time together to work towards a decent bench. But as far as the actual program, like I wouldn't change a thing. Like it'd be interesting to maybe try the extra round of the Circumax this time and see if it translates better. But I think at this point, it's like we said, I already have a good raw base. We can keep building that always. But I think just at this point in time, training under heavy loads and perfecting the execution in the gear is going to be the most beneficial for me.
And it's a lot of people, ask me like, oh, where do you find these guys? Like most of the guys that like we train with, like usually most of the people grow up playing a sport, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, rugby, anything. And I'm always like, yo, if you have, you played collegiate football, even if you play collegiate football at the lowest level, you still need to be a very good athlete to compete at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
Way better than even top level high school football, and I'm just using football for an example. That goes for baseball, soccer, whatever. So I'm like, if you have somebody that's just a good athlete, you could mold them into, you just need to use that athleticism, use that size, use those natural instincts that any athlete would have, just translate it into 3 movements. That's it. Like Bobby is a freakish athlete. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he's a loser, didn't go to college. He had raw natural abilities of 500 plus pound raw bencher. So getting him into the gear, regardless if he was good in the gear or not, he's going to put up a big total and be strong. And, he put up 25 something his first meet, which is
absurd,
insane. But like, he was in the gear, same thing, maybe 12 weeks, and then kind of did a meet. But once you get those people more technically sound in the gear, then it's lights out. Jeremy was down in Georgia forever training at Marietta Barbell. Obviously those guys had success down there. I won't take that away from him, but when he came up here, me and him had the same exact total, 2,400, squatted 1,000. Like, I'm looking at him, I'm like, yo, there's no fucking way. Like, no way. He never really like box squatted, just kind of, same thing, deadlifted always with straps. And I'm like, yo, we need to change all of this. So retooled a lot. And now, like, I look at him, I'm like, dude, there's no way I could even fucking keep up anymore. So, I think a lot of that has to do with it, is just kind of finding somebody's natural ability, honing in on it, and running with it.
Yeah, and I think that athlete instinct comes into play a lot too. I think a prime example of that would be with my deadlift this prep. Was about, I don't even know, a couple weeks into prep, maybe it was right before prep started, and I was just starting to get back into the gear, and I was like, I'm getting to the bar so easily, why the fuck aren't I tightening my straps? I'm using gear for a reason. And then obviously since then, like, I could probably still even go tighter. I could probably almost go as tight as my squat because I'm very flexible. So, like, why not adapt to that? And that's something you can adapt on the fly, that maybe someone, like, for example, a football athlete, like, on the play, like, maybe you notice there's kick step in a different way. You can adjust to that and then make an improvement, and you're going to see results immediately.
Right. You were interior line in college?
D-end.
Yeah. So, like you already have that fast twitch muscle. Like, you need to be quick, fast explosion off the ball. First step has to be, fast and hard. It's the same thing in gear. Like, that's what I tell, like, even, Big Sam Shadone, he squatted 900 his first meet. He was, a collegiate football player. And I'm like, yo, just think about when you're squatting down, as I'm counting down, that's just pre-snap reads. And when you hear me call up, it's fast off the ball. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, like, JT and Big Mike. Dude squatted 1,000 at 18 years old. When they first came to the gym, they were all over the place. And I'm like, yo, slow everything. Like, if you run around at this speed, not thinking in football like a fucking retard, you're going to get your fucking dick knocked in, and you're going to be sitting on the sideline. Like, think about what the fuck you're doing. Slow everything down in your mind. And then, like I said, when you get that call, all you have to do is be explosive that first movement, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think, kind of backtracking a little bit too, with not necessarily the athletic aspect, but the whole believing in others and believing yourself. That's something that honestly didn't really truly hit until that third deadlift this past Saturday. It's something that I always thought I was going to be pretty strong. I didn't think I was ever going to get to the top, but I think after this weekend, I was able to realize more of my true potential, and I think it'll be interesting to see just how far I can go from here, because
do you ever think, like, oh, damn, like 800 pounds is like, peeking around the corner right there? Like, damn, like we were talking, you're like, yo, 700 is the goal. Like, now you're like, yo, fuck this. Like, I'm going to open up over 700 next meet. Like,
yeah,
800's right there. 1,000-pound squat is right there. It's a big fucking total at the end of the day, if you could put that all together.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love about our group, is there's so many people that can keep pushing you and keep supporting you. Like, obviously we like to shit on each other. We joke all the time and stuff, but at the end of the day, when someone needs that support, everyone's there for them.
Yeah. And I'll, somebody like Bear, like, you look at Bear when, Bear first started with me, he's naturally a good squatter, he's a big squatter. He gets every single ounce out of his gear that he can. But like when I started working with him, I was just like, dude, he's a person that if you tell him to do something, he'll do it. But if you don't truly mean what you say to him, he can feel that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like he'd come down to the gym and same thing I said to you. I'm like, yo, no fucking pussy shit. Like put it on your fucking back and move it how it's supposed to move. And like I said, he's, squatted 1,000 twice now.
Yeah.
At meets. And he did it under probably some of the roughest conditions that, a human could go through during that prep. So, if you believe in somebody 100%, it rubs off on them, just translates over to other people now. So, and now, like when that happens, now you have the confidence going in the gym to be like, yo, I'm that fucking dude. Like I could keep up now. Like it's always fun to be that guy chasing, you know what I mean? Obviously John's a 1,200-pound squatter. Like, the hunt is the funnest part.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tell everybody, like being the hunter is way more fun than being the hunted.
Yeah.
Everybody wants that top spot, and the journey to get there is, the best part. Talking shit with the homies is the best part. Like I talk shit to Bob, he's way fucking stronger than me. Outbenches me by 5 pounds in a shirt, which is retarded because he's so much stronger than me. But like, that's like the one thing I have on him, and, I won't let that go. But it's stuff like that, just pushes people and drives people. So like I said, if you're getting programmed and coached by somebody and you're kind of stale and, kind of going through the motions, change it up, man. Sometimes all you need is just like, not to sound like a fucking bitch, but like a positive community of people behind you to support you and push you, sometimes that's all it takes. Like I said, I think it's just as much the support system as it is the programming.
Yeah. And I think the whole being the hunter thing, it's like when even like probably halfway through prep, like deadlift started clicking all of a sudden, and I keep going to the deadlift because obviously it's a surprise, but John's like, dude, you're going to catch up to me soon. Like, I got to get my ass back in gear. I'm like, dude, no fucking way. You pulled 804. Like, I'm like 150 pounds behind you. And now I'm 50 pounds behind him, and I'm gaining speed. And it's like, same with JT. Like, he was a little worried too. And now it's like, all right, now we got some competition going on. And
what's you pull out JT now, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So fuck you, JT. And now, like I said, now you're nipping on, the most jacked power lifter in the world, Connor, right now too. So nip it on those heels. Fucking Kirby's a great puller. Fuck, obviously, you got a long way to go to try and catch Delafob, but
yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's the ultimate goal someday.
Yeah. Like I said, at least if you pull over 800 soon, then you can talk some shit to Bobby.
That's I'm waiting for that day. So I think before we wrap things up, I guess obviously culture is very important in multiply and powerlifting as a whole. What is one of the biggest gripes or biggest things that you want to see change in powerlifting right now?
I think what I've been preaching on forever, and like I said, it's hard for me to get out of my own gym just because there's always so many people squatting in there and that I have to help is. Especially in New England, I know once you get out in like the Midwest and the West Coast, stuff is a lot more spread out. So I think we're a little spoiled over here, but there's so many good lifters in the area, all within, a 2-3 hour drive at most. Like, go out and be around those people. Like it's you're doing a huge disservice to yourself if you're not actively, seeking out to try and be better with better lifters. Like, I'd be a fucking fool if, when Rupo opened his gym to try and be like, oh, fuck this dude. Like, he's an hour and a half away from me. That's going to pull people, away from my gym and over there. And it's like, why not just push each other? Why not just vibe off each other? And I like I said, I think that's showing a lot now, from Maine all the way down to, I still count, New York, New Jersey as a part of New England because everything is so close. And I think it's brought, especially in the Northeast, a community way closer together. And it's
absolutely,
that's culture. I don't think, the raw world will ever truly experience that, which that's okay. But like I said, now, like, even just getting the boys out in like the Midwest, and in on the group chats, and vibing with them and everything, it's dope to see. And then when you go to big meets, it's literally just like all the homies just kicking it at a party. Everybody's talking about what they got going on. So I think that's what's, like I said, that's what I've been trying to make a movement in the culture. And I think the competitive negativity between crews and gyms, and like it was back in the day, is fucking stupid. Obviously when we all get on the platform, like, you're lifting to beat somebody, that's never going to go away.
Yeah.
But like I said, it only makes everybody better, as obviously people have been able to see over the past 2-3 years with what's been going on over here.
Yeah, I think it's great. Like you said, it's all of this region. We are definitely spoiled by the geography of it. I mean, we go to Long Island every year. We go to see Shauna, that awesome meet. There's Chris down in Jersey. There's you in Connecticut, Evolve in Worcester, Iron Helix in New Hampshire. And like, it's just, everyone there we're all well connected. We're all learning from each other, and everyone's benefiting from it.
Yeah. Even, like I said, even, Perfect Storm down in Florida. Like, I talk regularly with, Danny and Tommy down there. It's dope to, bounce ideas off of them. Delafive Merck down in Jersey, and then, obviously Wolfpack out there. Sean's a great mind in the sport. He has some of the strongest lifters over there too. So, like I said, if people need to break that stigma of, it's not, fuck the other team. I know, like, I hashtag like fuck your gym and stuff like that. And that solely came out of, like, obviously be proud of, who you are and what you've done. Obviously, like I preach all the time, lift for, the name on that scorecard, not for the gym or the name on the front of your shirt. Cause at the end of the day, that don't fucking matter. You do it for you.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I think that culture is starting to grow, and I think, that's really fucking awesome. My day comes when, I'm put 6 feet under it. Hopefully it continues.
Yeah. And I think part of the awesomeness about this region and stuff is getting people together for a big meet. So I know Holy Wars 3 is kind of starting to ramp up in the cards. And so give us a little bit of I guess like a teaser for that.
So, we kind of have I started Holy Wars, obviously, a little background story. Obviously, people know that I'm not, the biggest fan of the WPO. All that to the side. I mean, what was it, 2-3 years ago now? The WPO was just kind of, going through the motions, and people were getting fucking tired of it. And I was like, yo, fuck it. For the people that, like, don't want to do it and are tired of it, like, I'll throw a meet. Like, I don't fucking care. I think it was like 15 people were like, yo, fuck it. Holy Wars, like, come down. I think it was a spur of the moment thing, like 8-week notice. Like, me and Kirby were like, yo, let's do it. Do it together. It was an awesome meet. People were like, yo, that was fucking sick. Yeah. And then we did it last year. And it got bigger. People came from, across the country. We had some good prizes. Like I said, I think, it's hard to do at my gym because it's so small.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think people really, especially in multiply, it's an underground sport. People just want that loud, energetic platform. Like, bro, I don't give a fuck about the live stream and what people going on. Like, I want to go onto a platform and it looks like a fucking ball, a barroom brawl.
Yeah.
Like, that's what gets you fired up. And then when some, like, people hit big lifts, the energy goes fucking nuts. And that's what people feed off of. So, talking to, obviously the minds that be in the multiply community from across the country, we're going to do it again this year. It's not going to be, I want to start rotating, the meet around the country, just so it switches it up.
Yep.
I don't want people just traveling to, the shitty city of fucking Bridgeport, Connecticut, and, the armpit of winter to travel out to meet. And I think moving it around will give, different opportunities for people to fly to different areas, see different gyms and stuff like that, especially the multi-plat gyms. So we're going to host it a little more north, this year. It's going to be up at Evolve. Still going to be, Holy War is still going to be that dark dungeon feel to it. And
Red Light District.
Yeah, Red Light District powerlifting, bar on scene, the light show, the loud music. But like I said, I think it'll give the lifters, better opportunities, something to look forward to. Hopefully year 4, we could do it out, at Wolfpack, or, if Tommy, like I said, wants to do it down in Florida, everybody put their heads together. And I think that's the cool part about it, is there's so many lifters involved with it. It's almost like a team effort. I hosted it, at Hellbent, but it was in, a separate warehouse. Thank God there was, good weather and it didn't snow, and it was a beautiful day out for, people to go back and forth. But so that's the plan this year. I know I put out that originally that we were going to do it in December. It's going to be an IPA meet. IPA contacted me. They want me to host it a little bit later. They said if I did, they put up a big stack of money for it. So
that's an easy no-brainer.
Yeah, so I think that's what we may do. And then, like I said, it'll give people a little time to transition. Obviously, if some people are doing the WPO, which, my hat's off to them. I think everybody should experience it once. Hopefully it's a good experience for them. And then, if they wanted to make the jump over to Holy Wars, they could definitely do that. But like I said, we don't disappoint with platform presence, stuff like that. So like I said, it's going to be a group effort between, people at Hellbent, you guys at Evolve, Connor with Iron Helix, many more. Obviously, Wolfpack is involved heavily. So it's going to be a dope one this year.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how it goes. I mean, I went to the first 2, and like I said, it was one of my favorite meets to go to. So I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter, someone going into their first meet, a word of advice, what would that be?
I think it's just standard across the board. Everybody says it. Have fun, enjoy the moments, and share it with people. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of parents don't go to meets. They're like, oh, it's stupid. Make them go to the meet. Take some pictures, because those memories are, some of the best memories that, I've ever had. If you have a little brother, little sister, aunt, uncle, bring them. Like I said, even if it's just for squat, just have them come, have them watch you lift, and, enjoy the memories, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I got my dad to come up to this meet just because I was like, hey, it's in Massachusetts this time. Your ass better be there. And he's the first one right out there after I finished the lift on the platform with me. So those are definitely memories that you can't beat.
Yep.
Well,
so that's it, man. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the process, and it's all about longevity.
Yes, sir. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
All right. As always, stay hated.